These women like a man in a uniform and didn't hesitate to use their charms on the officers. But what they did was far more subtle than this other woman. In this video, I'll be showing you 6 times cameras caught women successfully manipulating officers in real time. Starting with Grace Spoonmore. Our first case takes us to Brunswick, Ohio, where on April 30th, 2023, what began as a routine traffic stop escalated into one of the most bizarre police encounters ever captured on camera. Grace Spoonmore, a 20-year-old woman from Georgia who worked as a stripper at Cleveland's Hustler Club, found herself in the crosshairs of law enforcement after allegedly causing a hit-and-run collision in plain view of Officer Dominic DeMettle. The blue Buick Enclave that Spoonmore was driving immediately raised suspicions, not just because of the accident, but because the vehicle was registered to a man with outstanding felony warrants for assault and probation violations related to cocaine possession. When Officer DeMettle approached the vehicle, the signs of intoxication were unmistakable: bloodshot eyes, slurred speech, and the distinct odor of alcohol emanating from both Spoonmore and the vehicle's interior. Initially denying any alcohol consumption, Spoonmore eventually admitted to consuming what she described as 2 doubles of patron tequila at a location she curiously referred to as Trick's house, before correcting herself and acknowledging she'd actually had 3 doubles, a total of 6 potent drinks before getting behind the wheel. What transformed this from a standard DUI stop into viral internet content was Spoonmore's extraordinary attempt to charm her way out of trouble. As the body cam footage reveals, she embarked on an increasingly bizarre flirtation campaign with Officer DeMettle.
I don't know, you want to take me? Touch me real quick.
When being placed in handcuffs, Spoonmore took the flirtation to another level with an unexpected response to the officer's standard question about weapons.
You want to tase me?
No.
Do it.
Stay in the blue box.
I like it kinky.
Throughout the encounter, she referred to DeMettle as a handsome man and made suggestive comments about her legs not being properly positioned in the patrol car. She even boldly revealed her occupation as a stripper at the Hustler Club in downtown Cleveland, implying a peculiar familiarity with law enforcement by stating, "You know, don't play dumb with me. At least 7 different officers want to report me because I won't sleep with them because I work there." But Spoonmore's behavior wasn't limited to flirtation. She alternated between seduction attempts and defiance, refusing to provide her current address with statements like, "Don't worry about all that, I'm not giving it to you," and challenging officers with, "What are you going to do if I don't?" The situation deteriorated further when, according to police reports, Spoonmore allegedly spat on Officer Robert Dugan while in the patrol car. Though this specific act wasn't captured on camera, the footage does show her kicking the plexiglass divider and yelling shortly afterward. This assault led to a felony charge of harassment with a bodily substance. In perhaps the most undignified turn of events, Spoonmore urinated in her pants during transport to the police station. Rather than showing embarrassment, she giggled about the incident, stating, "I couldn't help it," and attempted to remove her soiled jeans while waiting for her mugshot, creating a situation so awkward that officers had to request female assistance. The bizarre nature of the encounter took an even stranger turn when Spoonmore began making wild accusations, claiming the officers intended to rape her or take her down to Mexico, statements that visibly confused the officers dealing with her. An additional layer of mystery was added when an unidentified woman approached the officers during Spoonmore's arrest, claiming to be looking for her. The woman said Spoonmore had left a family function and was being tracked via a phone app, but couldn't provide basic information about Spoonmore, such as her address or how long she had been in Ohio. When questioned further, the woman responded defensively, "Why does that matter?" This strange interaction, combined with Spoonmore's erratic behavior and comments about her workplace, led to speculation on social media platforms about potential human trafficking involvement. Ultimately, Spoonmore faced multiple charges: operating a vehicle under the influence, OVI DUI, speeding, obstruction of official business, simple assault on a police officer, and felony harassment with a bodily substance. Her bond was set at $10,000 with a pretrial hearing scheduled for September 18th, 2023, and a criminal trial set to begin on October 2nd, 2023. Despite her elaborate and increasingly desperate attempts at manipulation, Grace Spoonmore's efforts proved entirely ineffective. The officers remained professional throughout, undeterred by her alternating tactics of seduction and defiance. Her case serves as a striking example of how modern policing, bolstered by body cameras and professional training, has largely neutralized the effectiveness of such manipulation tactics, regardless of how brazenly they're deployed. But not all manipulation is obvious. Some try to charm their way out with a smile and a well-timed question. Jenna Maldonado. When we turn our attention to the case of Jenna Maldonado, we witness a dramatically different approach to officer manipulation, one that relied less on overt sexuality and more on establishing a personal connection through seemingly innocent conversation and subtle flattery. This case, which unfolded in New Mexico in 2023, demonstrates how even more restrained attempts at charm can fail to sway professional officers from their duty. Jenna Maldonado's encounter with law enforcement began with a routine traffic stop when officers suspected her of driving under the influence. Unlike Spoonmore's overtly flirtatious behavior, Maldonado took a more measured approach, engaging the officer in lighthearted conversation while subtly complimenting him. The body cam footage captured her attempting to use charisma and friendly banter to create a connection that might lead to leniency. What makes Maldonado's case particularly interesting is how she attempted to shift the interaction from a professional police stop to a personal conversation. Early in the encounter, she displayed genuine curiosity about the officer's personal life, inquiring about his marital status and age in a way that seemed designed to establish a human connection beyond the officer-civilian dynamic.
You're not married? Why not?
I was once before.
Yeah?
Yeah, no more.
What happened?
Life happens. Sometimes you just fly out of love. Just doesn't work out.
How old are you?
How do you think I am?
This approach represents a classic manipulation tactic, humanizing yourself to the authority figure and creating a sense of rapport that might make them reluctant to enforce penalties. By asking personal questions and showing interest in the officer's life, Maldonado was attempting to transform a law enforcement interaction into a more casual, friendly exchange where the power dynamic might shift in her favor. However, despite her efforts to build rapport through personal questions and friendly conversation, the officer remained focused on his professional duties. He recognized the manipulation attempt for what it was, a strategy to avoid the consequences of driving under the influence. The training and professionalism of modern law enforcement were evident as he maintained appropriate boundaries while still treating Maldonado with respect. Unlike some cases where officers might engage more with such conversational gambits, this officer maintained a professional distance while conducting the necessary DUI investigation. He answered her personal questions briefly but continually steered the interaction back to the matter at hand, her suspected impairment and the legal procedures that needed to follow. In the end, despite her more subtle and socially adept approach to manipulation, Jenna Maldonado's charm offensive proved ineffective. The officer informed her of her impending arrest, and her attempts at building a personal connection failed to sway the course of justice. She was arrested for driving under the influence, facing the same legal consequences she would have regardless of her friendly demeanor and personal questions. Where Maldonado relied on charm, Karina Armando brought confusion, starting with pulling herself over before police even had the chance. Karina Armando. Moving from the extreme behavior of Grace Spoonmore and the subtle approach of Jenna Maldonado, we arrive at the case of Karina Armando, which presents yet another variation on the theme of attempted manipulation during a police encounter. Karina's interaction with law enforcement occurred in Montville, New Jersey in July 2023 and demonstrates how even situations that begin with a certain levity can quickly turn serious when impaired driving is involved. Karina's story begins in an unusual manner. Rather than being pulled over by police, she actually pulled over voluntarily before an officer had even initiated a traffic stop. This peculiar start to the encounter immediately raised questions for the officer who approached her vehicle.
Hi! The reason I'm stopping you, well, I didn't stop you. Why did you stop? Let me ask you that.
This bizarre beginning set the tone for what would become an increasingly strange interaction. When questioned about her whereabouts, Karina demonstrated an unexpected candor by immediately admitting she had been at Thatcher's, a local Irish pub. This honesty, while perhaps admirable in some context, immediately raised the officer's suspicions about her sobriety.
So, where are you coming from right now?
Just coming from Thatcher's.
From Thatcher's? Okay.
With suspicions of drunk driving now at the forefront, the officer proceeded to conduct standardized field sobriety tests. It quickly became apparent that Karina was struggling with the tests, showing clear signs of impairment as she attempted to follow instructions and maintain her balance. Her performance on these tests confirmed the officer's suspicions that she was indeed under the influence. What makes Karina's case noteworthy is how her demeanor changed once she arrived at the police station for a breathalyzer test. It was at this point that her attitude shifted from cooperative to flirtatious, flirtatious, apparently hoping that charm might somehow mitigate her situation. With a playful tone, she joked about the unfamiliar procedures, saying, "We didn't do this before." This attempt at lightening the mood seemed designed to create a more favorable impression with the officers handling her case. Throughout the booking process, Karina maintained this playful demeanor, making comments that appeared calculated to disarm the officers and perhaps encourage them to view her more sympathetically. Her flirtatious behavior wasn't aggressive or overtly sexual, but rather seemed to aim at creating a friendly rapport that might somehow translate into leniency. In a surprising twist to the story, Karina was informed that she would be released pending her court appearance. This outcome, being released rather than held in custody, could be interpreted in multiple ways. It might simply reflect standard procedure for first-time DUI offenders, or it could suggest that her more personable approach did influence how officers processed her case. Even if it didn't eliminate the charges altogether, the conclusion of Karina's interaction with law enforcement left observers with mixed impressions. Her funny mood and a well-timed, blush-inducing comment apparently made an impression on the officers, though it's unclear exactly what was said that caused this reaction. This moment of apparent connection raises questions about whether her flirtatious strategy had some limited success, even if it couldn't erase the legal consequences of her actions. Despite any momentary rapport she may have established, Karina still faced the serious legal consequences of driving under the influence. While she was released rather than detained, she still had to contend with court appearances and potential penalties, including fines, license suspension, and mandatory alcohol education programs. Just when things seem strange enough, the next encounter adds a wild twist, complete with costumes and chaos. Naomi Furer. The case of Naomi Furer presents perhaps one of the most dramatic and desperate attempts at manipulation captured on police body cam footage. Occurring on October 30th, 2023 in Florida, this case is particularly notable because it involved a suspect who was still dressed in her Halloween costume when she was pulled over by police, creating a surreal backdrop for the intense interaction that followed. Naomi Furer, described in reports as a Hooters waitress originally from Switzerland, attracted the attention of law enforcement while driving in her Halloween attire. What might have been a routine traffic stop quickly escalated as officers discovered multiple serious violations. The situation became immediately more serious when officers discovered that Furer's driver's license had been suspended for nearly a year and her license plates had long expired. These weren't minor infractions, but significant legal violations that suggested a pattern of disregard for driving regulations. When questioned, Furer attempted to downplay the seriousness of her situation, attributing her apparent impairment to fatigue rather than intoxication. However, the officers noted clear signs that contradicted her explanation: bloodshot eyes and slurred speech that strongly suggested alcohol consumption. Following standard procedure, the officers conducted a field sobriety test, which Furer failed, further confirming their suspicions of driving under the influence. It was at this point, facing the reality of arrest, that Furer's behavior shifted dramatically from casual explanation to increasingly desperate manipulation. As the reality of being arrested began to sink in, Furer launched into a passionate plea with the officers. Her Halloween costume, combined with her increasingly frantic behavior, created a bizarre scene that the officers had to navigate professionally.
You are going to jail for DUI.
Please, sir, please.
It's out of my hands.
Furer's pleading quickly escalated as she expressed fears about the potential impact on her immigration status. Being from Switzerland and in the United States on a green card, she clearly feared that a DUI arrest might have consequences beyond the immediate legal penalties.
Which I'll pick myself up, please, sir. I don't want to go out of the U.S., please.
It's
Please, sir, it's going to ruin my whole life.
a DUI does not mean that you're going to up and be deported.
Yes, because I'm from Switzerland. I'm on a green card.
When her initial appeals to sympathy failed to change the officer's decision to arrest her, Furer's desperation led her to make a shocking offer. In a move that crossed the line from manipulation to potentially criminal behavior, she made what reports describe as an unusual and risque offer to the officers.
I'll take everything off. Please don't charge me. I don't want to go to jail. Please, sir.
I don't want you to take everything.
This statement, while somewhat ambiguous in its exact meaning, was clearly interpreted as an inappropriate suggestion that she would remove her clothing or possibly offer sexual favors in exchange for leniency. The officers, however, remained completely professional in the face of this inappropriate offer, refusing to engage with the suggestion and maintaining focus on the legal process at hand. The officers firmly explained to Furer that her current situation was the direct result of her own choices and that they were simply enforcing the law based on those decisions. This moment of clarity from the officers cut through her manipulation attempts with a straightforward assessment of reality.
You put yourself in this situation. We're just a consequence of your decisions tonight, okay?
Despite all her efforts, from emotional pleas about her immigration status to inappropriate offers, Naomi Furer was arrested and placed in the back of the police vehicle. Her increasingly desperate tactics proved completely ineffective against the officer's professional commitment to enforcing the law fairly and consistently. What makes Furer's case particularly notable is the dramatic escalation in her manipulation tactics. Beginning with simple excuses and explanations, she quickly moved to emotional appeals about her future and ultimately to inappropriate suggestions that could potentially constitute additional offenses. This escalation demonstrates the psychological pressure that suspects sometimes place themselves under, making increasingly risky gambles in hopes of avoiding arrest. The officers in this case demonstrated exemplary professionalism, refusing to be swayed by emotional appeals, immigration concerns, or inappropriate offers. Their handling of the situation reinforces the importance of body cameras, which not only protect officers from false accusations, but also create accountability for maintaining professional standards even in unusual or challenging circumstances. But in the next case, manipulation takes a dark turn, where, instead of owning her mistakes, she turns the tables, trying to seduce the officers and shift the blame onto them. Kelly Barton. The case of Kelly Barton demonstrates how attempts at manipulation can sometimes cross into truly inappropriate territory, particularly when alcohol significantly impairs judgment. This incident, which occurred in a case made public through body cam footage, shows the lengths to which some individuals will go to avoid arrest, even when their actions have endangered others. Kelly Barton, 48 years old at the time of the incident, found herself in serious legal trouble after an accident involving a lamppost. What made this case particularly concerning was that Barton wasn't alone in the vehicle. She was transporting a special needs patient as part of her job responsibilities when she crashed. When police arrived at the scene, it was immediately apparent that Barton was significantly impaired. The footage captures her looking a little less than her best thanks to a few too many drinks, as one report delicately put it. This observation would be serious enough in any circumstance, but became particularly alarming given her professional responsibility for the welfare of a vulnerable individual.
Kelly?
Yes?
How are you doing?
Good.
Perhaps realizing the seriousness of her situation, Barton attempted to deny responsibility for the accident, despite the fact that driving was her job and she had clearly been behind the wheel. Unfortunately for her defense, security camera footage from a nearby gas station definitively proved she was driving when the collision occurred. As medical personnel arrived to conduct evaluations, Barton's behavior took a remarkable turn. Rather than continuing with denials or explanations, she pivoted to an entirely different strategy: overt flirtation with the officers at the scene. This shift in approach appeared to be a last-ditch effort to distract from the serious nature of her offenses.
Do you want the light squad to check you, ma'am? Yeah. Okay. Let them do what they gotta do. Come on, boys. How you feeling?
As paramedics attempted to evaluate her condition, Barton repeatedly directed sexually suggestive comments toward the officers, creating an increasingly uncomfortable situation for the professionals attempting to do their jobs.
I want the little young boys. Ask me how I'm feeling. Let the little young boys tell me. Let me tell you something.
Her comments became progressively more inappropriate, including explicit statements about what she would do to the officers, focusing particularly on their physical appearance.
What I would do to you with your blue eyes.
Well, let me check your blood sugar real
Okay.
quick.
Look at him.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I would do him in a way that he won't admit.
These statements, captured clearly on body camera footage, represent some of the most explicit attempts at officer manipulation documented in recent cases. Despite the uncomfortable nature of her comments, the officers maintained their professionalism, focusing on the legal and medical aspects of the situation rather than engaging with her inappropriate behavior. After conducting multiple tests, it became clear to the officers that Barton was significantly over the legal limit for alcohol consumption. Based on this evidence, she was arrested for driving while intoxicated. Reports indicate that the officers struggled to get her into the police vehicle, suggesting that physical resistance may have been added to her verbal manipulation tactics. What makes Kelly Barton's case particularly serious is the combination of circumstances surrounding her impaired driving. Not only was she operating a vehicle while intoxicated, a serious offense in itself, but she was doing so while responsible for a special needs patient. This added layer of professional negligence likely resulted in additional charges related to neglect of a vulnerable individual under her care. Her flirtation tactics, which ranged from mildly suggestive to explicitly inappropriate, proved completely ineffective in altering the course of justice. The officers remained focused on the evidence of intoxication and the circumstances of the accident, demonstrating how professional training helps law enforcement maintain appropriate boundaries, even when faced with overtly comments. However, this final case takes the manipulation up a notch, where she thought she'd outsmarted the cops with a fabricated story, only for her social media stunt to blow up in her face. Skyler Fluess. The case of Skyler Fluess stands out from our previous examples because it involves not just an attempted manipulation during a police encounter, but also a subsequent public fabrication about the interaction that was later exposed by body cam footage. This 18-year-old story demonstrates how modern police technology can serve as a powerful check against both manipulation tactics and false claims about law enforcement interactions. Skyler Fluess's encounter with law enforcement began when an officer observed her vehicle weaving between lanes, suggesting possible impairment. Following standard procedure, the officer initiated a traffic stop to assess whether Fluess was fit to drive.
I blew a 3.8 and he let me off with a f***ing warning and gave me his number.
During the stop, Fluess appeared emotional and claimed she was distressed because she had recently been dumped by her boyfriend. This explanation for her erratic driving seemed designed to elicit sympathy from the officer and potentially avoid a more thorough investigation into whether she was impaired.
Okay. Were you on your phone and stuff too?
I was trying to call him to get a hold of him because my heart hurts.
When asked directly about alcohol consumption, Fluess denied having anything to drink, attempting to attribute her driving behavior entirely to emotional distress and phone use rather than impairment.
Okay. Well, I'm just concerned that you were weaving because of alcohol, but if you're on your phone, have you been drinking or anything tonight? No.
The officer, showing compassion for her apparent emotional situation while still performing his duties, opted to give Fluess a warning rather than a citation or arrest. This decision might have been influenced by her emotional state, the lack of clear evidence of intoxication, or simply officer discretion in what appeared to be a case of distracted rather than impaired driving. What makes this case truly remarkable is what happened after the traffic stop. Rather than simply accepting the fortunate outcome of receiving only a warning, Fluess took to social media with an entirely fabricated version of the encounter that painted herself as a master manipulator and the officer as unprofessional.
I blew a 3.8 and he let me off with a f***ing warning and gave me his number and said we should meet for coffee or lunch. He was hot, so I'm getting lunch with him tomorrow.
This social media boast contained multiple shocking claims that she had registered an astronomical 3.8 on a breathalyzer test, a level that would actually indicate near-fatal alcohol poisoning rather than mere impairment, that the officer had given her his personal phone number, and that they had arranged a date. If true, these claims would represent serious professional misconduct by the officer. However, the body cam footage told a completely different story. The video evidence showed that Fluess had not been breathalyzed at all during the stop, much less registered any reading. It also showed that the card the officer gave her contained only standard department information, not a personal phone number, and that no invitation to coffee or lunch had been extended.
Sounds like you're having a rough night, so I'm not going to add to that by writing you a ticket or anything, okay? So I'm just going to give you a warning. It's not a big deal. I just want to make sure you're okay. You were weaving a little bit, and I just want to make sure you're okay to operate the motor vehicle, and I believe you are. So my information's right here on the front. The reason I stopped you here is on the back. Wherever you're headed, get there safely, and I'm sorry you're having a bad night.
The fabrication might have remained unchallenged had it not been for the existence of the body cam footage. When the officer's department became aware of her social media claims, they were able to review the video evidence and definitively refute her story. This public correction not only cleared the officer of alleged misconduct, but also exposed Fluess's dishonesty. To compound matters further, additional videos surfaced showing Fluess chugging tequila from the bottle and acting drunk at a party just hours before she was caught driving. These videos directly contradicted her claim to the officer that she hadn't been drinking, revealing that her initial denial of alcohol consumption was itself a manipulation attempt. When confronted with the overwhelming evidence against her, both the body cam footage disproving her social media claims and the party videos showing her alcohol consumption, Fluess ultimately confessed to the fabrication.
I ended up getting a little too intoxicated. I was taking shots all night, and I decided to make the dumb decision to get into my car and drive.
She also admitted that her claims about the officer asking her out were completely fabricated for social media attention, a confession that highlighted how easily false accusations against police can spread in the age of viral content. Remarkably, despite the exposure of both her initial lie to the officer about not drinking and her subsequent public fabrication, no further legal action was taken against Fluess. The officer who had initially shown her leniency by issuing only a warning chose not to pursue additional charges for her false statements, either during the traffic stop or afterward on social media. By falsely claiming that the officer had acted inappropriately, she attempted to manipulate not just her legal situation, but also public perception of both herself and law enforcement. In depicting herself as someone who successfully seduced an officer out of a DUI charge, she sought social validation through a fabricated narrative of manipulation, only to have that narrative completely easily dismantled by objective video evidence. If you enjoyed this video and wish to see more similar content, make sure to check the videos popping up on your screen.